On Tuesday, just gone, the 20th of June, it was World Refugee Day. And now on the line is Isabel Simpson, who is the Executive Director of Médecins, Frontières Ireland, or MSF Ireland. Isabel, welcome to the programme.
Hi, good morning, Darren. Lovely to speak with you today.
Okay, Isabel, I read the article on the RT website on Tuesday about MSF and World Refugee Day. Uh, I understand that the issue of refugees is a huge issue in the world today, in some countries or regions more than others. I saw also on the MSF website that you personally have over 25 years experience working in the humanitarian area. Can you start off, Isabel, by telling me a bit about your experience personally and that of your colleagues um, in general and in dealing with the refugee crisis in the countries in which you work?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Darren. Um, First of all, maybe just to explain a little bit about Médecins Sans Frontières. We work in response to emergencies and humanitarian crises, providing medical care. And we are an international medical humanitarian organization. The assistance we provide is free from other agendas, and it's based on needs alone. Through our humanitarian principles of neutrality and impartiality and independence, that allows us to provide healthcare in places where others can't or won't or choose not to go. Médecins Sans Frontières can also do this because over 90% of our funding is from private individual donors. Currently, we're working in over 70 countries worldwide. I would like to focus a little bit today on our work in Bangladesh with the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar. You asked me, Darren, about how the situation had changed over the years. And unfortunately for the Rohingya in Bangladesh, not very much has changed. There was in August 2017, there was a mass exodus of over nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees who, because of violence and atrocities in Myanmar, fled across the border into Bangladesh. The Rohingya are a Muslim minority population, and they are truly a stateless people because although many of them have been born and brought up in Myanmar, they're not recognized by either Myanmar or Bangladesh. 6 years down the line, what we have in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh is a series of camps or settlements that have all joined up together to become one mega camp, in which approximately 800,000 to 1 million refugees are still living in. And this is an area of probably around 26 square kilometres, which we can think of as being maybe about the size of 4 Phoenix Parks in Dublin. And it is in fact one of the biggest refugee camps globally at present. The Rohingya refugees are fenced into these camps, and they have little access to shelter, food, clean water, latrines, and they're not permitted to work even within the camps, let alone outside. As Médecins Sans Frontières, we run multiple hospitals, primary health centres and health posts in and around the camps. And last year alone, our medical teams provided more than 750,000 outpatient consultations, and we admitted more than 22,000 patients to the hospital for care. Unfortunately, this year, funding for services in the camps has been drastically cut, meaning that other NGOs who provided healthcare, water, sanitation, or education, for example, no longer have the means to continue their services, or the services have been vastly reduced. Even more concerning is that there have been 2 rounds of cuts to the food rations received by the Rohingya refugees, which of course increases the risk of malnutrition and has a serious consequential impact on their health condition as well. The refugees in these camps are completely dependent on food assistance, and in the first round of cuts this year, the rations were reduced by 17%. Now there's the second round of cuts is imminent. That's going to reduce the food rations to around the equivalent of $8 per person a month, which, you know, in Dublin is probably around the price of 2 cups of coffee. Previously, it was $10 a month, which is still way below anything that would provide an adult with the standard 2,100 calories per day. In the camps, we are treating patients for a wide range of conditions, including respiratory infections, diarrheal diseases that are linked to poor hygiene and sanitation conditions. And the camps, of course, are very densely populated, which makes them breeding grounds for disease outbreaks. When I was there in 2017, there was actually quite a large outbreak of diphtheria, which affected not only children, but also adults. And of course, diphtheria is a disease which, you know, is no longer seen in Europe, and yet it's still very prevalent in the refugee populations. At the moment, we are battling against another epidemic, which is an unexpected one, and that's an epidemic of scabies, which started last year. And due to surveys that we have conducted since then, we can say that nearly 40% of the refugees in the camps in Bangladesh are suffering from scabies. And in some parts of the camps, this figure goes up to nearly 70%. And this, you know, very much reflects what Médecins Sans Frontières have seen in our clinics. And since last year, we've conducted over 200,000 consultations for scabies. It's actually unfathomable that a scabies outbreak should have been allowed to go on for this long, causing so much pain and suffering and indignity, when it's actually a very simple disease to treat. But because of the funding cuts and the deterioration in the conditions in the camps, it's a disease that has really got out of control. These figures really show the consequences of that. Shelter, water, and sanitation are key here to combat the disease. And because of the living conditions, the Rohingya refugees are still at a huge risk of these infectious diseases. It needs a really strong, multi-pronged response from all organizations working in these camps and also from the local authorities to address this and to also address the appalling water and sanitation conditions that have allowed this outbreak to get out of control.
Yeah, I didn't know the situation was that bad. I didn't know about the cutbacks. Remember doing an interview with Sorka Nick Fahuna from Oxfam Ireland several years ago. She no longer works at Oxfam now, but she was telling me about her experience with a recent trip to a refugee camp in Malakal in South Sudan. And the situation she described with water and sanitation was appalling. That interview was several years ago. So you're saying in that camp you're talking about, it's probably worse than that. It's because it's on a bigger scale, yeah?
Yeah, the scale in these camps is, it's huge. And we have a responsibility as a humanitarian community to ensure that there is sustained funding and resources to provide these Rohingya refugees with dignified and safe living conditions until their situation changes and they can take back control over their own lives. More and more, though, we are responding to severe humanitarian crises that are happening simultaneously in multiple countries and all causing increasing numbers of people to be internally displaced or to cross international borders as refugees. Médecins Sans Frontières is currently responding to conflicts in the Middle East, Africa, and in Europe, where mass migration and displacement, hunger, and malnutrition situations at the same time are happening as funding cuts and shortages in food relief. And this is together in a background where policies are actually hardening towards vulnerable people, both refugees and migrants who are displaced by these issues.
You are very brave people working in MSF and other humanitarian organisations in these crisis countries or regions, I have to say. Isabel, okay, I know that your organisation MSF and many others think that the European Union policies are not only not making things better for refugees, but they're actually making things worse. Can you expand, Isabel, on how EU policies are making things worse for people who are on the move today?
Yeah, sure. I think a major example was sadly seen last week, where as MSF we were appalled at the tragic shipwreck off the coast of Greece, where fortunately there were some survivors, and in Greece we provided psychological support to these survivors, but sadly there were also still several hundred others who potentially have lost their lives in this shipwreck. It's very difficult to know how many people are actually on these vessels, and the numbers of people who have lost their lives in the Mediterranean trying to reach protection and a safer destination. We do know that so far this year, over 1,170 people have lost their lives at sea attempting the journey across the Mediterranean, which is, you can probably say, is one of the deadliest borders in the world. But this figure is an underestimate, and deaths are believed to be far higher. Médecins Sans Frontières is calling again and again on European states to fulfill their obligation to create safe and legal pathways to protection for these people, to also coordinate and conduct rescues at sea, and to establish a dedicated, proactive, state-led search and rescue mechanism. And of course, in relation to the tragedy last week and even earlier this week, when lives were lost off the coast of the Canary Islands in Spain, we hold all the survivors in our thoughts and their families who have been affected by these tragedies. Médecins Sans Frontières, we operate our own search and rescue ship in the Mediterranean, where we are continuously, proactively searching for these small boats in distress. When our team encounters a wooden boat or a dinghy, and these boats are often dangerously overcrowded, not only with men but also with women and children. We go out to reach them on fast boats or rigs, distribute life jackets, and then start to bring them safely to the main ship, the Geo Balance. Once on board, we have a fully operational clinic on board with doctors and medical teams so that they can treat emergency cases immediately. We also frequently, our midwives on board have had to assist many women with deliveries. And we even recently had a pregnant woman who arrived on board already in labour. And we're able to take care of them until we can dock in a port of safety. And of course, in many ways, then the journeys for these survivors are just beginning when they arrive in Europe. Although, you know, they've already been through so much trauma. Since we launched our search and rescue activities in the Mediterranean in 2015, we have rescued over 80,000 people at sea. And last week even we also we rescued 38 people from a small fiberglass boat, which also included children and other unaccompanied minors. When we do a rescue, our boat, the Geo Balance, then have to go to a place of safety to disembark the survivors. And it needs to be mentioned that the problems don't, you know, stop there, because there are ongoing attempts to impede and make it more difficult for us as humanitarian responders to find ports of safety. Now the Italian authorities have assigned us the port of Ancona as a safe place to disembark, but it's really far away from the search and rescue zone, and it means that our ship has to travel further and be away from the search and rescue area for longer. And of course, when we're away disembarking a certain amount of survivors, it means that there's no search and rescue taking place in the Central Med.
Okay, as well as calling on the European Union to have a fair process for refugees entering the European Union, crossing from the Mediterranean, I imagine you're calling for a big increase in funding from the EU and UN and national governments to be able to feed, clothe and look after all these people in the refugee camps adequately, yeah?
Yeah, we are indeed, as Médecins Sans Frontières, as you say, we're calling consistently on the EU and the member states to address the lack of safe pathways and to, put in place solutions and mechanisms that put human lives and protection first, and to address the lack of state-led search and rescue systems, but also to stop the criminalisation of NGOs like ourselves who do the search and rescue activities. For other situations, like the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, we also call on the UN as well as the EU and other donor governments to, find solutions that are going to better address the funding gaps, solutions that are more sustainable and durable and ensure that the basic needs and services and food rations are available to these very vulnerable populations who have no other options but to rely on humanitarian assistance. Thank you so much, and we'd love for listeners to find out more about our work on the website msf.ie. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak with you today, Darren.